The crack of gunfire echoed through the early morning stillness, sending a flock of startled birds into the azure Wyoming sky as Olivia Kincaid's horses reared in panic. One moment, she was navigating the rutted trail toward Sheridan, and the next her world capsized with terrifying speed, the wagon lurching sideways before toppling entirely, pinning her beneath its weathered wooden frame and the weight of her scattered belongings. Xavier Irwin hadn't expected anything beyond the usual tedium when he'd set out to check fence lines that crisp autumn morning of 1878. The 30-year-old cowboy had been riding the boundary of the Rocking I Ranch for hours when he heard the distant gunshot, followed by the unmistakable sound of horses in distress. Something within him, instinct perhaps, or providence, urged him to spur his stallion toward the commotion. He crested the hill to find a grim tableau, an overturned wagon, a pair of frantic horses still harnessed but twisted awkwardly, and most alarmingly, a woman's hand visible beneath the jumble of wood and canvas. "Hello," Xavier called, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Can you hear me?" "Help," came the weak reply. "Please, I can't move." Approaching the wreckage, Xavier knelt to assess the situation. Beneath the wagon's side panel, he could see a young woman with copper-colored hair, her face pale with pain and fear. One arm was outstretched while the other appeared trapped alongside most of her body. "I'm Xavier Irwin," he said, his deep voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "I'm going to get you out of there, miss." "Are you badly hurt?" Olivia Kincaid, she managed through gritted teeth. "I don't think anything's broken, but I can't feel my legs anymore." Xavier's mind raced. The wagon wasn't massive, but loaded with trunks and supplies. It weighed enough to crush the life from her slender frame if he didn't act quickly. There was no time to ride for help. The nearest ranch was his own, a good hour away, and Sheridan lay even further. "Miss Kincaid, I need to lift this wagon. When I do, I need you to pull yourself free if you can. You understand?" Her green eyes widened. "Lift it. Alone." "No choice," Xavier replied grimly, already positioning himself at the wagon's edge. He shrugged off his worn leather vest and rolled up the sleeves of his faded blue shirt. "On my count. 1, 2. Xavier took a deep breath, bent his knees, and with a primal grunt he heaved upward. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as the wagon shifted slightly. It wasn't enough. "Please," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. Something in her plea ignited a strength Xavier hadn't known he possessed. With a roar that seemed to come from his very soul, he lifted again, his powerful shoulders and back straining against the impossible weight. Inch by precious inch, the wagon rose. "Now," he commanded through clenched teeth. Olivia summoned every ounce of strength remaining and dragged herself forward, her skirts catching on splintered wood, but tearing free as she clawed her way from beneath the shadow of death. The moment she cleared the wagon's edge, Xavier's arms gave out and the structure crashed back to earth with a resounding thud. He dropped to his knees beside her, chest heaving from the exertion. "Are you all right?" Olivia lay on her back, gulping air as sensation painfully returned to her limbs. "I think so," she managed, though tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks. "You saved my life." Xavier helped her to sit, supporting her shoulders with a gentle hand. Now that the immediate danger had passed, he took stock of her properly. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 25 to his 30 years. Despite the dirt and disarray, her beauty was evident in the delicate curve of her jaw and the determined set of her mouth. "What happened?" he asked, offering his canteen. Olivia accepted it gratefully, taking a measured sip before answering. "Someone shot at me. I didn't see who I was focused on the trail. The horses panicked and—" She gestured helplessly at the overturned wagon. Xavier's expression darkened. "Bandits? I don't know." Nothing was taken as far as I can tell. She attempted to stand but swayed alarmingly. Easy now, Xavier cautioned, catching her elbow. You've had a shock. Let me help with the wagon and see to your horses, then we can figure out what comes next. With skilled efficiency, Xavier calmed the agitated horses, checking them for injuries before unharnessing them from the wreckage. Fortunately, they seemed more frightened than hurt. The wagon was another matter. One wheel was shattered, and the axle had snapped. I'm afraid this won't be traveling anywhere today, he said, surveying the damage. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. We can gather what you need and I'll take you there to recover. Olivia hesitated, her gaze traveling over this stranger who had materialized from nowhere to save her life. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of whiskey. His dark hair was overlong beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. Yet despite his rugged appearance, there was a gentleness in his manner that reassured her. I was headed to Sheridan, she explained. My aunt lives there. I'm supposed to be her companion. She glanced at the scattered contents of her life clothing, books and personal items strewn across the prairie grass. Everything I own is here, Xavier nodded, understanding her reluctance to leave her possessions. We'll salvage what we can and secure the rest. I can bring a team tomorrow to collect your wagon for repairs. Sheridan's a half-day's ride, and you're in no condition to travel that far right now. Olivia knew he was right. The sun was already past its zenith, and she could feel bruises forming across her body. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, and the thought of climbing onto a horse filled her with dread. Very well, Mr. Irwin. I accept your offer of shelter, she said with as much dignity as she could muster. They worked together to gather her most essential belongings, packing them into Xavier's saddlebags and a makeshift bundle tied behind the saddle. He fashioned a crude shelter over the wagon using canvas from its covering, weighing it down with rocks to protect her remaining possessions from the elements. What brought you to Wyoming territory? Xavier asked as they worked, curious about this refined young woman traveling alone. Olivia tucked a stray copper curl behind her ear. I was teaching in St. Louis, but the school closed. My aunt wrote offering me a position in her household. She's elderly and needs someone to manage her affairs. Xavier noted the careful way she phrased her answer, sensing there was more to her story. Teaching's honorable work. What did you instruct? Literature and music primarily. I play the piano. She closed a trunk with finality as though shutting away that part of her life. And what of you, Mr. Irwin? Have you always been a rancher? Xavier smiled faintly. Born to it. My father established the rocking eye during the first cattle boom. When he passed 5 years ago, it fell to me to maintain his legacy. And your mother died when I was 16. Influenza. His tone was matter of fact, but Olivia detected the old grief beneath it. I'm sorry, she said softly. My parents are gone too. Father in the war, mother just last year. A shared understanding passed between them, the quiet acknowledgement of those who know loss intimately. When they'd secured everything they could, Xavier helped Olivia mount his stallion midnight. Her skirts made riding properly impossible, so she sat sideways on the saddle, one arm wrapped around Xavier's waist for balance as he walked beside the horse, leading Olivia's team on long reins. The journey to the rocking eye was slow but gave them time to talk. Xavier pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory's early days that he'd heard from his father. Olivia found herself grateful for the distraction from her aching body and the shock that still resonated through her. Have you lived in Wyoming long? She asked, noting how confidently he navigated the seemingly featureless landscape. All my life, he replied. Watched Sheridan grow from nothing more than a trading post, This land gets in your blood, becomes part of you. Olivia considered this. I've never stayed anywhere long enough to feel that way. Father was an army officer, we moved frequently. And now I hope to find some permanence with my aunt. She paused, then added quietly, if I can still reach her without my wagon. You'll reach her, Xavier assured her. I'll see to it personally. As the afternoon lengthened into evening, the Rocking Eye Ranch appeared on the horizon, a collection of sturdy log buildings nestled in a protected valley beside a winding creek. Smoke curled from the main house's chimney, and in the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides. It's lovely, Olivia remarked, genuinely impressed by the well-maintained property. Xavier smiled, pride evident in his expression. It's home. As they approached, a tall man with graying hair emerged from the barn, followed by a lean, weathered cowhand. Boss. We were getting worried, the older man broke off, noticing Olivia. What's this now? Frank, this is Miss Olivia Kincaid, Xavier explained. Her wagon overturned on the North Trail. Miss Kincaid, this is Frank Holloway, my foreman, and Pete Wilson, one of our hands. Both men removed their hats respectfully. Frank's eyes were sharp with concern as he assessed the situation. Injured, madam? Bruised but whole, thanks to Mr. Irwin, Olivia replied, conscious of her disheveled appearance. Xavier handed Midnight's reins to Pete. Take her horses to the corral. Make sure they're fed and watered. Frank, please tell Mrs. Abernathy we need a room prepared and hot water for our guest. The men moved to their tasks without question, and Xavier gently helped Olivia down from the horse. Her legs buckled as they touched the ground, and he caught her against him, one arm solid around her waist. I'm sorry, she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. Nothing to apologize for, he replied, his voice low near her ear. You've endured more than most could today. He supported her to the main house, a spacious two-story structure built of locally harvested pine. Inside, a plump woman with iron-gray hair hurried to meet them, her expression shifting from curiosity to motherly concern at the sight of Olivia's condition. Land sakes. What happened to this poor girl, Mrs. Abernathy? This is Miss Kincaid. She'll be our guest until she's recovered. Her wagon overturned on the trail. The housekeeper clicked her tongue sympathetically. You come right along, dearie. I've got water heating already, and there's stew for supper. Olivia found herself whisked away to a comfortable bedroom on the second floor, where Mrs. Abernathy helped her bathe and change into a borrowed nightgown. The older woman gasped at the angry purple bruises blooming across Olivia's ribs and back. Lord above, it's a miracle nothing's broken. That wagon must have had you properly pinned. It did, Olivia confirmed, wincing as Mrs. Abernathy applied arnica salve to the worst of the bruising. If Mr. Irwin hadn't found me when he did. That boy's got more strength than sense sometimes, but thank the Lord for it today, Mrs. Abernathy said fondly. He's a good man, our Xavier. Keeps mostly to himself since his father passed, but runs this ranch fair and square. Olivia absorbed this information, curious about her rescuer. Has he no wife, family of his own? Mrs. Abernathy shook her head. There was a girl once before the war. She couldn't abide ranch life, left for Denver. He doesn't speak of it, but it changed him. She helped Olivia into bed, plumping pillows behind her. Now I'll bring you up some supper on a tray. You rest easy tonight. Left alone, Olivia sank gratefully into the soft mattress, her mind replaying the day's events. The terror of being trapped, the astonishing moment when Xavier had lifted the wagon through sheer force of will, the quiet strength in his arms as he'd carried her to this room. She'd been so focused on her own discomfort that she'd scarcely thanked him properly. A soft knock at the door roused her from these thoughts. Xavier entered, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl and a cup of tea. Mrs. Abernathy's hands were full with supper for the men, he explained, setting the tray on the bedside table. How are you feeling? Better, thank you. Olivia sat straighter, conscious of her borrowed nightgown and loose hair. Mr. Irwin, I don't know how to adequately express my gratitude. What you did today, he waved away her words. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. Not anyone could have lifted that wagon, not alone. You saved my life at considerable risk to your own. Xavier's expression softened, and he took a seat in the chair beside the bed. Then I'm glad I was the one who found you. There was something in his gaze that made Olivia's heart quicken, a warmth and intensity that seemed to reach past her defenses. For a moment, neither spoke, caught in an unexpected current of connection. Xavier broke the silence first. I've sent a rider to Sheridan with a message for your aunt, explaining what happened and assuring her you're safe. He should return tomorrow with her reply. That was thoughtful, thank you. Tomorrow I'll also send men to retrieve your wagon and belongings. Our blacksmith can likely repair the damage, though it may take a few days. Olivia nodded, feeling both relieved and strangely reluctant about the prospect of continuing to Sheridan so soon. I'm imposing terribly on your hospitality. Xavier smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. Having a guest is hardly an imposition, Miss Kincaid. In fact, it's a welcome change from the usual routine. She returned his smile, warming to his easy manner. Then I shall try to be an entertaining guest, Mr. Irwin, once I can move without wincing. He laughed softly. I've no doubt you will be. Now you should eat while the stew's hot and then rest. Dr. Barnes will ride out in the morning to check you over properly. As he rose to leave, Olivia felt a sudden reluctance to see him go. Mr. Irwin, he paused at the door. Yes, thank you. Not just for the rescue, but for your kindness afterward. Xavier's expression held something she couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of pleasure and something deeper, more complex. Good night, Miss Kincaid. Sleep well. After he departed, Olivia found herself staring at the closed door, replaying their conversation in her mind. There was something about Xavier Irwin that intrigued her, a combination of physical strength and gentle consideration that seemed at odds with her previous encounters with men of the frontier. She ate the hearty stew and drank the tea, which was laced with something medicinal that eased her pain. As she drifted towards sleep, her thoughts remained on the tall rancher with the whiskey-colored eyes who had appeared like an angel of mercy on the loneliest stretch of trail. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the bedroom window and the distant sounds of ranch life, men calling to one another, horses nickering, the rhythmic chopping of wood. Olivia woke feeling stiff, but considerably better than she'd expected. She managed to dress herself in the clean clothes. Mrs. Abernathy had left one of her own simple cotton dresses that had been in Olivia's salvaged trunk. A light knock preceded the housekeeper's entrance with a breakfast tray. Good morning, dearie. You've got some color back today. How are you feeling? Sore but much improved, Olivia replied truthfully. Is there news from my aunt? The rider returned at dawn. Your aunt sends her relief that you're safe and says not to worry about the delay. She's apparently laid up with gout and couldn't travel to fetch you anyway. Mrs. Abernathy set down the tray. The doctor should be here mid-morning. Mr. Xavier's already ridden out with the men to recover your wagon. Olivia felt a strange disappointment at missing Xavier, but focused on the meal before her: fresh eggs, bacon, and biscuits still warm from the oven. This looks wonderful. You're very kind, Mrs. Abernathy beamed. Been a while since I've had a young lady to fuss over. The men appreciate my cooking well enough, but it's not the same. After breakfast, Olivia insisted on coming downstairs, unwilling to remain bedridden when she could walk, albeit gingerly. Mrs. Abernathy showed her to the ranch house's parlor, a surprisingly refined space with bookshelves, comfortable furniture, and a piano in the corner. Mr. Xavier's mother was quite the accomplished musician, the housekeeper explained, following Olivia's gaze. He keeps it tuned, though nobody plays it now. Olivia moved to the instrument, running her fingers lightly over the keys. May I, of course? It would do the old thing good to sing again. Settling on the bench, Olivia began to play a simple melody, wincing slightly as her bruised muscles protested but persisting through the discomfort. The piano was indeed well maintained, its tone warm and resonant. She lost herself in the music, moving from the initial melody to a chop-in nocturne that had always been her mother's favorite. So absorbed was she that she didn't notice Xavier's return until the final notes faded. Looking up, she found him standing in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, watching her with an expression of surprised pleasure. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, removing his hat. "That was beautiful." Olivia felt a blush warm her cheeks. "I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Abernathy said it would be all right. More than all right. That piano hasn't been played since my mother died." He moved into the room, his tall frame seeming to fill the space. "You're up and about earlier than expected." "I've never been very good at staying idle," she admitted. "Were you able to retrieve my wagon?" Xavier nodded, taking a seat across from the piano. "It's in our barn now. The damage isn't as bad as I feared: broken wheel, cracked axle. Silas thinks he can have it repaired within 3 days. 3 days, Olivia repeated, uncertain whether she felt relief or disappointment. "Dr. Barnes should arrive shortly to examine you, but if he agrees you're well enough, perhaps you'd join me for a tour of the ranch this afternoon, unless you'd prefer to rest." The invitation surprised her, as did her eagerness to accept. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Irwin." "Xavier," he corrected gently. "If we're to be sharing meals and conversation for the next few days, perhaps we can dispense with some formality." "Then you must call me Olivia," she replied, smiling. He returned her smile, and something warm unfurled in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced before, both pleasant and unsettling. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Barnes, a gruff but kind man who pronounced Olivia remarkably unscathed given her ordeal. "Bruised ribs and some impressive contusions, but nothing broken or permanently damaged," he declared after his examination. "You're a fortunate young woman, Miss Kincaid. From what Xavier described, that wagon could have crushed the life right out of you." "I know," she said solemnly. "I'm grateful beyond words." The doctor packed his bag, adding, "Take it easy for a few days. No strenuous activity, but gentle movement will help with the stiffness. And count your blessings that it was Xavier who found you. Not many men could have lifted that wagon alone." After the doctor departed, Olivia rested in the parlor, reading one of the books from Xavier's shelves, a volume of Tennyson's poetry that showed signs of frequent reading. She was surprised by the well-stocked library, another indication that there was more to her host than first appeared. By mid-afternoon, her restlessness got the better of her, and she ventured onto the porch just as Xavier approached from the barn, leading 2 horses, his black stallion and a gentle-looking chestnut mare. Dr. Barnes said gentle movement would be beneficial, he called as he neared. "I thought a slow ride might qualify if you're feeling up to it." Olivia hesitated only briefly before descending the steps. "I'd like that." Xavier helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Unlike the previous day, she was properly attired for riding, with her split skirt allowing her to sit astride comfortably. "This was my mother's horse," Xavier explained as they set off at a walk. "Daisy's getting on in years now, but she's steady and kind." Olivia patted the mare's neck. "She's lovely. Do you keep her just as a reminder of your mother? Partly, he admitted. But she's also the best horse for teaching young ones to ride. My foreman's grandchildren come visit sometimes. They rode at a leisurely pace around the perimeter of the ranch headquarters. Xavier pointed out various buildings and features the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, the blacksmith shop where Silas was already at work on her wagon, the vegetable garden that Mrs. Abernathy tended with fierce pride. It's much larger than I imagined, Olivia remarked, taking in the scope of the operation. How many cattle do you run? About 1,200 head at present, Xavier replied. Not the biggest outfit in the territory, but respectable. We focus on quality over quantity. As they rode, he shared stories of growing up on the ranch, learning to ride almost before he could walk, his father's patient instruction in the business of cattle ranching, his mother's insistence that he receive a proper education despite their frontier location. She hired tutors from back east, he explained. Said just because we lived among the cattle didn't mean I needed to think like one. Olivia laughed. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. His expression grew thoughtful. What about your mother? You mentioned she passed recently. Olivia nodded, her smile fading. Last spring, she never really recovered after my father died at Vicksburg. It was as though half her soul went with him. Xavier's gaze held understanding. That kind of love is rare. Yes, she agreed softly. I've often wondered if I'll ever find its equal. Their eyes met briefly before both looked away, suddenly conscious of the personal turn in their conversation. Xavier guided them toward a rise overlooking a creek, where a small grove of cottonwoods provided welcome shade. Shall we rest a while? There's water for the horses, and the view is worth seeing. They dismounted, and Xavier spread a blanket he'd tied behind his saddle. Olivia sank gratefully onto it, her muscles protesting the unaccustomed exercise after yesterday's trauma. Xavier produced a canteen and a small bundle containing bread, cheese, and apples. Mrs. Abernathy insisted I bring provisions, he explained with a smile. She believes no outing is complete without food. A woman after my own heart, Olivia replied, accepting a slice of apple. They ate in companionable silence for a while, gazing out over the landscape. From their vantage point, they could see for miles rolling hills dotted with cattle, the distant mountains hazed in blue, and the winding ribbon of the creek below them. It's beautiful, Olivia murmured. So vast and open. That's what I love most about it, Xavier said. The space to breathe, to think. Olivia studied his profile, strong and clean against the afternoon sky. You're not what I expected a Wyoming rancher to be like. He turned to her, one eyebrow raised in amusement. And what did you expect? She considered this. Someone rougher. Less. Thoughtful, perhaps. The men I've encountered in my travels west have mostly been coarse and uneducated. My mother would be pleased to hear her efforts weren't wasted, he said with a wry smile. Though I'm hardly sophisticated by Eastern standards. Sophistication isn't the same as character, Olivia replied. I've known plenty of sophisticated men with very little of the latter. Xavier studied her curiously. You speak from experience. Olivia looked away, plucking a stem of grass. My fiancé in St. Louis. He was very polished, very correct in society. He also ended our engagement when my mother's illness drained our savings and left me without a dowry. Xavier's expression darkened. The man's a fool. I thought so too eventually, she said with a small smile. At the time, it felt like the end of everything. Now I see it as an escape. They talked well into the afternoon, moving from personal histories to literature. Xavier's mother had insisted on the classics. Music. He confessed to being tone deaf but appreciative. And their hopes for the future. His to expand the ranch's breeding program, hers less defined but centered on finding a place to belong. As the sun began its descent, Xavier reluctantly suggested they return to the ranch house. "Mrs. Abernathy will have supper waiting, and I don't want to overtax your strength on your first day up." Olivia was surprised to realize how quickly the hours had passed. "Yes, of course. Thank you for today." It was restorative. The ride back was quieter, each lost in their own thoughts. Olivia found herself stealing glances at her companion, noting the way the setting sun gilded his profile and the gentle way he handled his powerful horse. There was a contradiction in Xavier Irwin that fascinated her, the raw strength that had lifted a wagon juxtaposed against the man who discussed poetry and kept his mother's piano tuned though no one played it. That evening, they dined together in the ranch house's dining room, joined by Frank Holloway, who regaled Olivia with tales of the early days of the territory. The conversation was lively, the food excellent, and Olivia found herself more at ease than she'd been in months, perhaps years. After dinner, Xavier invited her to the parlor. "Would you play again? If you're not too tired," she agreed readily, settling at the piano while Xavier and Frank took seats nearby. She began with a simple folk melody before transitioning to more complex pieces, stealing glances at Xavier between compositions. His face in repose was serene, eyes closed as he listened, one long finger tapping gently against his knee in time with the music. When she finished, he opened his eyes slowly as though reluctant to break the spell. "My mother would have enjoyed your playing." "High praise indeed," Frank commented, rising from his chair. "Well, I'll leave you young folks to your own devices. Early start tomorrow." He bid them good night, leaving Olivia suddenly conscious of being alone with Xavier. "Would you like to read?" Xavier asked, gesturing to the bookshelves. "Or perhaps another game of chess?" They had played earlier that afternoon when rain had cut short their ride. "Chess, I think," Olivia decided. "Though I warn you, I'll be seeking revenge for my earlier defeat." Xavier grinned, setting up the board. "Bold words, Miss Kincaid." "Olivia," she reminded him, moving to sit opposite him at the small table. "Olivia," he repeated, the name soft on his lips. The game began in earnest, both concentrating on strategy, though Olivia found her attention wandering to Xavier's hands as he moved the pieces, strong, capable hands that had saved her life. She wondered what those hands would feel like against her skin in a context beyond rescue or polite assistance. The thought startled her with its intensity, and she knocked over her king accidentally. "Conceding already?" Xavier teased. "Never," she replied, righting the piece and forcing her mind back to the game. They played late into the evening, talking intermittently about inconsequential matters. When Olivia finally prevailed, Xavier conceded with good grace. "Well played." "My father always said never to underestimate an opponent who observes more than they speak." Olivia smiled, pleased with the victory and the compliment. "Your father sounds like a wise man." He was. Xavier began returning the chess pieces to their box. "He would have liked you, I think." The simple statement touched her deeply. "I'm honored you think so." Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, that their connection had deepened beyond the circumstances of their meeting. Xavier cleared his throat and stood. "It's late. I should let you rest." Olivia rose as well, suddenly reluctant for the evening to end. "Yes, of course. Thank you for a lovely day, Xavier." He escorted her to the foot of the stairs. "Good night, Olivia. Sleep well." "Good night." As she climbed the stairs, she could feel his gaze following her, and a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with exertion or the lingering soreness of her injuries. The next 2 days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent helping Mrs. Abernathy with light household tasks, afternoons exploring the ranch with Xavier when his duties allowed, and evenings filled with music, chess, and conversation. Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to the taciturn rancher, whose quiet strength and unexpected depths of knowledge and feeling intrigued her. For his part, Xavier seemed equally captivated. He rearranged his responsibilities to spend more time with her, delegating tasks to Frank that he would normally have handled himself. His usual reserve gradually melted away in her company, revealing a dry wit and passionate opinions on everything from cattle breeding to politics. On the afternoon of the third day, they rode to a secluded spot by the creek where a natural pool had formed, deep enough for swimming. The early autumn weather remained unseasonably warm, and Xavier had mentioned the spot as one of his favorite retreats. "My mother taught me to swim here," he said as they dismounted. "She scandalized the entire territory by wearing men's trousers to do it, but she insisted I learn properly." Olivia laughed, imagining the scene. "She sounds thoroughly unconventional." "She was," he agreed with a fond smile. "A Boston society girl who fell in love with a cattle drover and followed him west. My father worshipped the ground she walked on." They settled on a large, flat rock beside the pool, removing their boots to dangle their feet in the cool water. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle gurgle of the creek and distant bird calls. "Silas says your wagon will be ready tomorrow," Xavier said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Olivia's heart sank. She'd known this idyll couldn't last, but the reminder of her impending departure came sooner than she'd anticipated. "That's good news. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Xavier turned to face her, his expression serious. "You haven't imposed, Olivia. Having you here has been." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "It's been the brightest few days I can remember in a very long time." The naked honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "For me as well," she admitted softly. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in his expression. Olivia found herself leaning toward him almost involuntarily, drawn by something powerful and undeniable. Xavier closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers with gentle restraint. The kiss was brief, tentative, but it sent electricity coursing through Olivia's body. When they parted, both seemed equally startled by the intensity of their reaction. "I shouldn't have," Xavier began. "No," Olivia interrupted, her fingers touching her lips. "I wanted you to." He studied her face, searching for confirmation. Whatever he saw there must have reassured him, because he reached out to cup her cheek with one large hand. "Olivia, I know we've known each other only days, but I feel as though a sudden crack of gunfire split the air, startling them apart." Xavier was on his feet instantly, placing himself between Olivia and the direction of the sound. "Get behind the rock," he ordered, his voice transformed from tender to commanding in an instant. Olivia scrambled for shelter, heart pounding as Xavier drew the revolver he carried at his hip. Another shot rang out closer this time, followed by the sound of approaching horses. "Xavier Irwin," a voice called. "Show yourself, you claim jumping bastard." Xavier's expression hardened. "Stay here," he murmured to Olivia. Then louder, "I'm here, Blackwell. What's your business?" 3 riders appeared on the bank above the creek pool. The leader, a heavy-set man with a florid face beneath his black hat, sneered down at Xavier. "My business is you stealing my water rights. That new dam you're building diverts from my grazing land." Xavier's stance remained relaxed, but Olivia could see the tension in his shoulders. "That water's on Rocking Eye property, Blackwell. Always has been. Your cattle have been trespassing." Blackwell spat. "Says you and your forged documents. My boys and I are here to teach you a lesson about respect." Olivia's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice, the same rough tones she'd heard just before the shot that had spooked her horses and overturned her wagon. These were the men responsible for her accident. Xavier seemed to realize it too. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Was it you who shot at the lady on the North Trail 3 days back, overturned her wagon?" Blackwell looked momentarily confused, then laughed. "That was just a warning shot at trespasser. Wasn't my fault her nags panicked. She survived, didn't she?" "Barely," Xavier replied, his voice deadly quiet. "She was trapped under that wagon for hours before I found her. Could have died there." One of Blackwell's companions shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Boss, you said nobody get hurt." "Shut up, Lester," Blackwell snapped. Then to Xavier, "Not my problem." "Now about that dam, the dam stays," Xavier cut him off. "And if I ever catch you or your men firing at travelers on my land again, the law won't find enough of you to bury. Now ride out while you still can." Blackwell's face darkened with rage. "You threatening me, Irwin?" "Just stating facts. Marshal Thompson might be interested to hear about your role in nearly killing an innocent woman. Attempted murder carries a hefty sentence in Wyoming territory." A tense silence followed as Blackwell weighed his options. Finally, he wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over, Irwin." "It is for today," Xavier replied evenly. The men rode off, Blackwell still muttering threats. Xavier waited until they were well out of sight before holstering his weapon and turning to Olivia, who had emerged from behind the rock. "Are you all right?" he asked, his face etched with concern. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "That was the voice I heard, just before the shot that frightened my horses." Xavier's expression darkened. "Jed Blackwell, he owns the next ranch over. We've had disputes over boundaries for years, but this is the first time he's resorted to violence." He took her hands in his. "I'm so sorry you were caught in the middle of it. It wasn't your fault," Olivia assured him. "Nevertheless, I'll be having words with Marshal Thompson tomorrow." "Blackwell's gone too far this time." He helped her back into her boots. "We should return to the ranch. I don't think they'll be back today, but I don't want to take chances." The ride back was tense, both alert for any sign of Blackwell or his men. Xavier insisted that Olivia stay close to the ranch house for the remainder of the day, posting extra men on watch around the property. That evening, dinner was a subdued affair, with Xavier distracted and Olivia processing the realization that the accident that had brought her into Xavier's life had been no accident at all, but the result of a neighbor's malice. After dinner, Xavier excused himself to confer with Frank about increasing security measures. Olivia retreated to the parlor, attempting to lose herself in a book, but finding her thoughts continually returning to the confrontation at the creek and the kiss that had preceded it. When Xavier finally joined her, his expression was grim. "I've sent a man to Sheridan for the marshal. He should be here by morning." Olivia set aside her book. "Do you think Blackwell will try something more tonight?" "I doubt it. He's all bluster unless he's got the advantage of surprise." Xavier ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of his agitation. "I'm more concerned about your journey to Sheridan tomorrow. I can't in good conscience let you travel alone, not with Blackwell making threats." "I had assumed you would accompany me," Olivia said quietly. Xavier looked relieved. "Yes, of course. Frank and I with 2 of our best men." He hesitated, then added, "Though I find myself wishing you weren't leaving at all." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Olivia's heart beat faster as she considered her response. Perhaps I needn't leave immediately," she ventured. "My aunt's letter said she didn't expect me until the end of the month. I could stay a while longer." Xavier moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, I know this is sudden. We've known each other only days, but I feel something for you that I can't explain, something I've never felt before." "I feel it too," she whispered, scarcely believing her own boldness. "It makes no logical sense, but logic has little to do with matters of the heart," Xavier said, his voice husky with emotion. He lifted one of her hands to his lips. "Stay, not just a few more days, stay permanently." Olivia's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm asking you to consider a life here, with me." His eyes held hers, vulnerable yet determined. "I know it's too soon to speak of love or marriage, but I want the chance to court you properly, to see if what we feel can grow into something lasting." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, not of sorrow but of unexpected joy. "My aunt can visit whenever she wishes, or you can visit her. Sheridan's not so far that you couldn't maintain the relationship." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I'm not asking for an answer now. Just for you to consider the possibility." Olivia looked around the parlor at the piano she'd come to love playing, the bookshelves filled with volumes waiting to be explored, the chess set where they'd spent hours in companionable competition. In just 3 days, this place had begun to feel more like home than anywhere she'd lived since childhood. "I don't need time," she said finally. "I'll stay." Xavier's face transformed with hope. "You're certain?" "As certain as I can be of anything." She squeezed his hands. "These past days have shown me more happiness than I've known in years. I want to see where this leads. With you." The joy that blazed across Xavier's features made her heart soar. He drew her close, one hand cradling the back of her head as his lips found hers in a kiss far less restrained than their first. Olivia melted into him, her arms encircling his neck as the kiss deepened, becoming an expression of all the emotions they'd barely begun to acknowledge. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he murmured, "especially not trapped under a wagon on my north boundary." Olivia laughed softly. "It seems fate has a peculiar sense of timing, and I'm grateful for it." He kissed her again, briefly. "Tomorrow I'll ride with you to Sheridan to explain matters to your aunt. Then, if you're willing, we can begin planning our future, whatever form that takes." "I'd like that," Olivia replied, her heart full to bursting with newfound hope and affection. They remained in the parlor late into the night, talking of practical matters and dreams alike. Xavier spoke of improvements he wished to make to the ranch house. "It needs a woman's touch, Mrs. Abernathy always says." And Olivia shared her hope of perhaps starting a small school for the children of ranch families in the area. When they finally bid each other good night, it was with the sweet certainty that this was merely the beginning of their journey together. The following morning dawned clear and bright. Xavier and Olivia set out for Sheridan with Frank and 2 ranch hands as escort, her repaired wagon loaded with her belongings. The mood was light, despite the potential danger from Blackwell. They'd received word that Marshal Thompson had arrived at the ranch shortly after their departure, and would be dealing with the troublesome neighbor. The journey to Sheridan passed without incident, the small town appearing on the horizon by mid-afternoon. Xavier helped Olivia down from the wagon in front of her aunt's modest house near the center of town. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly as they approached the door. "A little," she admitted. "Aunt Gertrude can be rather formidable." Xavier squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Not more formidable than a woman who survived being trapped under a wagon, I'll wager." Olivia's aunt proved to be a tiny, sharp-eyed woman who scrutinized Xavier with unnerving intensity throughout their explanation. When they finished relating the events of the past days, somewhat edited for propriety's sake, she sniffed loudly. "Well, it seems you've had quite the adventure, Olivia." "And you, Mr. Irwin, appear to have made quite the impression on my niece." "Yes, madam," Xavier replied respectfully. "I care deeply for your niece and would like your blessing to court her properly." Aunt Gertrude's eyebrows rose. "Court her? After knowing her less than a week? That seems rather precipitous, young man." "It does," he agreed readily. "But sometimes life presents opportunities that would be foolish to ignore out of adherence to conventional timelines." The old woman's mouth twitched, almost forming a smile. "HMPH, you speak well for a rancher." She turned to Olivia. "And you, my dear, are you certain this is what you want? You are to be my companion here." Olivia met her aunt's gaze steadily. "I'm certain, Aunt, but I'll visit often and you're always welcome at the ranch. It's not so far." Gertrude studied them both for a long moment before nodding decisively. "Very well. I suppose I can hire Mrs. Peterson's girl instead. She's a bit simple, but she can read aloud tolerably well." She fixed Xavier with a stern look. "You'll treat her right, or you'll answer to me, Mr. Irwin." "Olivia's all the family I have left." "Yes, madam. You have my word." After finalizing arrangements for Olivia's belongings and promising to return the following week for a proper visit, they took their leave. As they walked back toward where Frank waited with the wagon, Xavier released a breath. "Your aunt is indeed formidable," Olivia laughed. "She likes you. If she didn't, you'd know it unmistakably." Xavier helped her into the wagon, his hand lingering on hers. "Ready to go home," the word sent a thrill through Olivia. Home. Not just a place to stay, but a place to belong. "Yes," she said softly. "Home." The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and deepening connection. Xavier courted Olivia with an old-fashioned formality that touched her deeply, bringing wildflowers he'd gathered during his rounds of the ranch, reading aloud to her in the evenings, teaching her to ride better and shoot straight, just in case. For her part, Olivia threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning from Mrs. Abernathy about running such a large household, helping with the garden, and beginning to teach the foreman's grandchildren and several other ranch children 3 afternoons a week in a small building. Xavier had converted for that purpose. The threat from Jed Blackwell diminished after Marshal Thompson's intervention, though Xavier remained vigilant. The neighboring rancher had been fined for endangering Olivia and warned that any further incidents would result in more severe consequences. As autumn deepened toward winter, Xavier and Olivia's relationship blossomed from tentative attraction to profound attachment. They learned each other's habits and histories, strengths and weaknesses, dreams and fears. Each discovery only strengthened the bond between them. On a crisp November evening, with the first snow of the season dusting the distant mountains, Xavier suggested a ride to their special place by the creek. Bundled against the chill, they arrived to find that he'd arranged to surprise a small fire already burning in a stone circle, and a blanket spread nearby with a picnic supper packed by Mrs. Abernathy. "What's the occasion?" Olivia asked as he helped her dismount. Xavier smiled mysteriously. Can a man surprise the woman he loves without an occasion? It was the first time he'd spoken the word aloud, love, though his actions had declared it daily. Olivia's heart swelled as she reached up to touch his cheek, rough with the day's stubble. "Is that what I am? The woman you love?" His eyes, warm as amber in the fading light, held her steadily. "You know you are. You have been since the moment you played my mother's piano and brought music back into my home." They settled by the fire, sharing the meal and talking quietly as darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead. When they had finished eating, Xavier grew unusually quiet, almost nervous. "Xavier, is something wrong?" He shook his head, taking her hands in his. "Nothing's wrong. Everything is more right than I ever thought possible." He drew a deep breath. "Olivia, When I found you trapped under that wagon 2 months ago, I thought I was saving your life. I didn't realize you would be saving mine as well." "Saving yours," she echoed, puzzled. "I was existing, not living, running the ranch, doing my duty, but hollow inside." His voice grew husky with emotion. "You brought laughter back into my house, music, joy. You made me remember what it means to truly live." Xavier reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. From it, he removed a ring, a delicate gold band set with a small but brilliant diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "This was my mother's," he said softly. "My father gave it to her when he asked her to leave Boston and follow him west. I've been carrying it since the day we kissed by the creek, waiting for the right moment." He met her eyes. "I love you, Olivia Kincaid. Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness spilled down Olivia's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Yes. Yes, with all my heart." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love and promise of their future together. They were married on Christmas Eve in the Sheridan Church, with Aunt Gertrude, the ranch hands, and half the town in attendance. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly as Olivia walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk that Xavier had ordered from Denver as a surprise. Their wedding night was a revelation of tenderness and passion that sealed their bond in the most intimate way possible. As they lay entwined afterward, Xavier traced patterns on Olivia's bare shoulder. "Happy," he murmured. She nestled closer, her head on his chest where she could hear the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Perfectly so, and you, more than I knew was possible." He kissed the top of her head. "I keep thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't decided to check that section of fence that day." Olivia shivered slightly at the thought. "Or if you hadn't been strong enough to lift the wagon." Xavier's arms tightened around her. "I still don't know how I did it. It was impossible." "Love makes the impossible possible," she said softly. "Even before we knew it was love." Winter gave way to spring, and with the new season came news that filled the ranch house with even greater joy. Olivia was expecting their first child. Xavier's reaction to the announcement was everything she could have hoped for. His face transformed with wonder and delight as he lifted her in a gentle embrace. "A child," he whispered, his hand coming to rest reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our child." The months of waiting passed in a haze of happiness and anticipation. Xavier was attentiveness itself, ensuring Olivia rested sufficiently while still allowing her the independence she valued. Her small school continued to flourish, though she arranged for a proper teacher to take over during her confinement and recovery. On a golden afternoon in early October, almost exactly a year after their first meeting, Olivia gave birth to a healthy son they named James Edward Irwin, after both their fathers. Xavier, who had paced anxiously outside their bedroom during the delivery, was overwhelmed when the midwife finally allowed him to enter. "He's perfect," he breathed, cradling his son with hands that had once lifted a wagon but now trembled with emotion. "Just like his mother." Olivia watched them, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "He has your eyes, I think." Xavier leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you for him, for everything." Life at the Rocking I settled into a new rhythm centered around young James, who grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his father's serious expression and his mother's copper hair. Olivia's school expanded to include children from neighboring ranches, and Xavier's breeding program flourished, bringing increased prosperity and recognition to the ranch. 2 years after James's birth, a daughter joined their family, Elizabeth Ann, named for Xavier's mother and Olivia's. The ranch house, once so quiet that Xavier had found it oppressive after his father's death, now rang with children's laughter and music from the piano that Olivia played almost daily. On the 5th anniversary of the day they'd met, Xavier surprised Olivia with a special gift, a journal bound in soft leather, its pages filled with his neat handwriting. "What's this?" she asked, opening it curiously. "Our story," he explained. "From the day I found you until today. So our children will always know how extraordinary their parents' love story is." Olivia read the first page aloud softly. "I never believed in fate until the day I heard a gunshot and followed the sound to find a copper-haired woman trapped beneath an overturned wagon. In that moment, when I saw her hand reaching out from beneath the wreckage, something told me my life was about to change forever." Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at the man who had become the center of her world. "It's beautiful, Xavier. Thank you." He drew her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been on that fateful day 5 years earlier. "Thank you for giving me reason to believe in the impossible." Outside, the Wyoming sky stretched endless and blue above the ranch that had become their kingdom, their shelter, their home. Inside, surrounded by the family they'd created and the love they'd built, Olivia and Xavier found daily confirmation that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in lifting impossible burdens, but in opening one's heart to unexpected possibilities. "I love you," Olivia murmured against his chest. More with each passing day. Xavier's lips found hers in a kiss that still held all the wonder of their first. "And I you, my love, forever." As twilight painted the land in hues of purple and gold, they stood together on the porch of the home they'd filled with love and laughter, watching their children play in the yard. James, now 5, was showing his 3-year-old sister how to rope a wooden practice calf Xavier had built for him. "He has your determination," Xavier observed with pride. "And your strength," Olivia replied, smiling as their son successfully looped the rope around the wooden calf's neck, causing Elizabeth to clap her hands in delight. From tragedy had come their greatest joy, a truth they acknowledged each day with gratitude. What had begun with terror and pain beneath an overturned wagon had blossomed into a love story that would be told in their family for generations to come. And as stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Xavier drew his wife closer, silently thanking whatever fate or providence had led him to that lonely stretch of trail on an ordinary autumn morning, forever changing the course of both their lives.